Hey, welcome to Neversink Farm, and today I want to talk about LowCats and high winds. Pretty windy today, so it's a good day to talk about it. So LowCats, work really well in high wind because the most important thing about a tunnel, a low tunnel, is making sure wind doesn't enter, right? It's unlikely it's just going to push the whole thing down. It's just going to get inside and rip the covering off. And just like if you put covering down on your field without a tunnel, the amount of rocks it takes, you got to put them every 3 feet, so that the wind doesn't get underneath it, because it's always going to want to push on it, so it's always pushing, trying to loosen it. And once it gets it loose enough, it's going to try to get inside. But the nice thing about the LowCat is because of the shock cord, the wind has a very tough time loosening it. Right, but you got to check, every few weeks, just make sure there's not a whole bunch of loose things, right, from your setup, or it's sliding out from the end stakes or something, because the wind is always pushing on it, trying to make it loose. So you can't just put it up and 6 months later expect it to be the same way you set it up, right? It's a low tunnel, it's hoops with shock cord. But I'm going to give you some tips on, how to set it up the best way possible so that it'll be the most resistant. And one thing you want to do is, pay attention to the anchors. Okay, and there's two types of anchors. There's the ones for the covering, for the ends, and then anchor stakes. Okay, here, let me show you. That's an upright on a LowCat. And so that's how much is going into the ground. And the reason we do that is because we want this to work for everybody, right? Rocky soil, clay soil, sandy soil. So if you have very loose soil, you're definitely going to want to use a ground stake so that you get better holding capacity, right? Because if we put these, big ground stakes on the end of them, the people of clay soil, they're just not going to be able to get them in, right? They have very good holding. So that's about that. So let's go check it out. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to talk about is the ends. Okay, if you see the last hoop is at an angle, right? So you can see how this looks. And that's because that's going to get you a much better hold at the end than if it was straight. And I'll show you in a second the difference between what they look like if you do one each way. Then when you're putting these in, your stakes, okay, the first thing you want to do is just grab a bunch of it, and I'm going to show you that. Okay, and you're just going to put the stake right around it, okay? Just like that, okay? And then you're going to pull from all the sides, the top, this side, right? And you're going to just leave it like that. Then you're going to go do the same thing on the other side. Then put a shock cord in the middle, in the center, and then do the same thing on either side just to make sure it's nice and pulled taut. Once you have it nice and taut, then what I like to do is flip it over and then put another stake like that, right? So I just flip it back on itself and put another staple here. Okay, it's 2 staples. If you don't want to do that, you don't have to do that. But I find that to be the easiest, and that holds it nice and taut. Okay? So make sure it's taut here, center, and on the other side. Do it on both sides with only the center shock cord in. Then do this on both sides. Then put your shock cord in so that it's nice and taut. Okay? And then you want to make sure, you want to look at it. Is it taut, right? Is it holding itself, right? Is there a lot of, right, when the wind blows, is it moving a lot? Right? And then redo it if you don't like it. because setup is everything when it comes to high wind. If it's moving, it's going to eventually come down. Okay, so ground stakes. So if you want to keep yours up during high wind and not take them down, and if you have loose soil, then you want to put in a ground stake. And let me show you how to do it. Okay, so you want to just come across it and into the bed, right? So in that direction. Okay, just like that. And then you want to put it right over that loop. Okay, so I'm putting it across and into the bed. Okay, nice and deep. And then crossing that right there. Okay, so I'm pretty much just, down into the ground at an angle away from the hoop. And that's going to give its best holding. And obviously putting it on every hoop is the best. You can also do every other one, right? But all of this adds up, right? The more you do, the better holding it's going to be. It's just, the way it is. So right now this tunnel is set up for overwintering. And I did the same thing last winter. I set it up for overwintering, probably middle of the summer, left it up there for a year, and it didn't move at all sorts of winds and everything else. And that's because it's just set up right. I put in the time to make sure it's set up right, and then I just leave it. There's nothing else I do to it after that. If you're raising and lowering it, then just make sure that your sides are always touching the ground, right? The bunching should be right next to the ground, right? Because once the wind gets in there, it's going to want to take it. Okay? Okay, and you can see the same setup here, right, with the ends. Right, and this is heavy duty poly, and this is perforated poly. What's going to hold best in the wind is what's the heaviest, right? What's not going to stretch. The heavier covering, the better. So let me show you the difference between two different ends. Okay, so you can see here, this one's angled, that one wasn't. So what happens is this ends up getting pushed forward, right? Here it, holds the covering a lot tauter. But with shade cloth, because the wind goes straight through it, you're unlikely going to have it coming down in the wind. Okay, if you see, the one on the right, very taut. One on the left, you see how it's a little loose, right? If you want to get that tauter, right? If you want to go up to 40, 50 mile per hour winds, you're going to have to get it tauter. And the way to do that is you take the shock cord off. You don't need to take the top off. Take the shock cord off. Take off one of the stakes, right? You want to take off one of the stakes. Loosen it, and then you want to pull it tight, right? So you pull it along the edges, okay, along the top. Get it as tight as you can. Okay, but you want to do that without the shock cord, and then put it back. Okay. So you take all the shock cord off, pull it tight, and reset it. Because even after a few months, it can loosen up, you don't know how tight your thing was, you don't know if it's slipping, there's all reasons it could get loose. But the nice thing is, because it has shock cord, it's a lot less likely to get loose quickly, right? Because as it gets loose, the shock cord wants to pull it in, and that's what it's designed to do. Okay. Now, if you do have it comes down, the worst thing that's going to happen is your covering might get ripped. And you don't want to use recovery because you don't want wind to enter. But just put the thing back together again. You know, it's unlikely any of the parts will break. And just put it back up. But if you follow all those tips, and as long as you're not trying to do it in like hurricane winds or something, you should be fine.